Welcome to AI in Real Life, real talk with real experts, brought to you by the AI Institute for Societal Decision Making. I'm Katy, your host and a student at Carnegie Mellon University. In each episode, we delve into how artificial intelligence is shaping our world and influencing the decisions we make every day. Today, we're honored to have Professor Sean Ammirati with us. Sean is a Distinguished Service Professor of Entrepreneurship at Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business, co-founder of the Carnegie Mellon Corporate Startup Lab, a partner at Birchmere Ventures, and CEO of Growth Signals. His extensive experience spans founding and selling companies, venture capital, and integrating AI into entrepreneurship. Hi, Sean. It's a pleasure to have you here. Could you kick us off by explaining a little bit about your journey, like from building a company to teaching entrepreneurship and working venture capital?
Sure, Katy, and thank you for having me. It's great to be here. So I started my career doing a startup right out of grad school at Carnegie Mellon. So I didn't actually even finish grad school here, which is not something we try to publicize, but often the canonical dropout does happen these days. So left Carnegie Mellon to start a company in the early 2000s that was a machine learning startup. Back, I would say, when machine learning startups were bugs, not features. So if I walked into an executive's office in 2002 and told them, machine learning is going to change how your business works, they were much less interested in that than they are today.
I can imagine.
But ultimately, we ended up selling that business to Morgan Stanley. It helped with trading stocks, so it helped people build models to trade stocks more efficiently, and we sold that to Morgan Stanley. And then we did a very similar, from a technology perspective, very different industry perspective startup where we were predicting if content on the internet was relevant or irrelevant for people, and ultimately that was sold to LinkedIn. And so if you log into your LinkedIn account today and you see the ribbon of news across the top of your page, that's our startup. So you're welcome or I'm sorry, depending on how you feel about that. And then came back to Carnegie Mellon, started teaching, did another startup, and then ultimately started investing and really have spent the last 15 years doing a mix of investing in companies, creating companies, and teaching entrepreneurship here at Carnegie Mellon.
Wow, that's so interesting. And let's just start with your latest venture, the Growth Signal. And it's described as a platform where AI helps people to build new products or services. And for our listeners with no technical or business background, could you explain a little bit more how does that actually looks like and how can actually AI help someone to start a business?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you think about, and probably most of your listeners have probably at least gone to ChatGPT or Claude and interacted with a system like that. If you think about what you might even do in a system like that, one of the prompts that they may even nudge you to do is hey, why don't you use this tool to brainstorm? That's a common thing you'll hear, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about how someone who's creating a company might brainstorm, right, they're going to try to understand things like how desirable is the product that they have in mind or the service they have in mind? How feasible is it to build that? How viable a business can they build? And the reality is with slight tuning to how these underlying models work, you can actually have technology that helps people have almost like a co-collaborator with them as they go through that journey of conceiving, testing, and ultimately launching a business.
Got it. But when we think about actually launching a startup, there's a lot of uncertainty associated with it. And one challenge that people always talk about AI is that sometimes it hallucinates.
Yeah.
In other words, confidently give you the wrong answer. And how do you help people know when to trust the AI suggestion or when to trust their own instinct or expertise?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that we think about that, right? So one of the things I think that's important is, and this is very in line with the work we do here at AISDM, it's very much human in the loop interactions, right? So the way that a lot of this started as research here at CMU, where we were trying to accelerate creating traditional startups, 3 people in a garage, now it's 3 people in a garage plus a language model, right? But it's evolved to a lot of companies using this as well. So companies are using this to launch new products and new services as well. And in all those cases, I always encourage the humans involved to think of these LLMs as co-founders, but not the CEO. So the ultimate human judgment is done by the human, not by the algorithm. The other part so that's kind of point one. Point two is you can build these systems in ways where you do show the source material that it's referencing. And in certain cases, that becomes incredibly valuable. So you can kind of get the algorithms to show their work and then examine the work that's behind it. And then the third thing is, in some parts of brainstorming, actually hallucination can also be a bit of a benefit, right? If you're looking for just a bunch of really diverse ideas that you're going to later test for feasibility, viability, desirability, you know, a bunch of hallucinations, 80% of which are crazy ideas, but 20% are really interesting. It's often an interesting way to kind of fill the funnel of interesting new ideas to explore.
Got it. And I think now it might be really different from you have experienced in 2000. And now we actually seeing there's a huge rise about AI-focused startups.
Yeah.
And from your perspective as an investor, what helps certain teams or ideas stand out in the space, especially when so many seems to be doing the similar things?
Yeah, so it is an exciting time to be in venture capital and in artificial intelligence. I'm spending most of my energy these days running growth signals, not investing. But in the market at large, you know, there are, as a percentage of venture capital, there is a higher percentage of venture capital flowing into AI startups today than flowed into internet companies in the late 90s. So just for context, like, you are right. This is a moment in time where there's a lot of excitement around that. I think that's because, similar to the internet, you can tell that this is a transformative general purpose technology that's going to change a lot of the ways that things happen. And so ultimately what happened in the late 90s, and I think what will happen here, is that we will end up building a lot of, and this reference is probably before your time, but we'll end up building a lot of like pets.com. Some of your listeners may remember pets.com was a very famous e-commerce site that was going to sell pet food on the internet. People, they were the first internet company to buy a Super Bowl commercial. They had a sock puppet as their mascot. And they famously kind of imploded, and people were quick to point out that people really, really love going to the pet store to get pet food. And it actually turned out that wasn't quite right, because, you know, a couple decades later, Chewy went public for $8 billion. So people do, you know, these shifts, like, we're going to build some pets.com, and that's going to happen where we're just a little too early. I also believe we're going to build a lot of Amazons, like the next set of Amazons. And the way venture capital works, as long as you have some Amazons in your portfolio, you can cover a lot of pets.coms. So I think just that's why there's this excitement. In terms of the things that are predictors of it, it depends a little bit on where in the stack you're talking about, right? So there's a lot of dollars flowing into compute and kind of foundational models on top of that compute, and then application layers. Personally, I think the best venture returns will come at that application layer, but lots of people have different perspectives on that.
Got it. That's so interesting. And beyond just startups, I know that you also help the big companies innovate through the corporate startup lab.
That's right.
And how to help large organizations adopt AI strategies and get more creative, especially I think they tend to play it more safe or moving slowly.
Yeah, I think that has historically been true. I think most executives today are very conscious that this is going to change how their business works, and they need to figure out how to adjust to those changes. Now, the how you do that is different. So part of this is definitely learning and development, right? You need to upskill and retrain your teams. Part of this is kind of reimagining processes and org structure. We've done a lot of work on this in a variety of different capacities here at Carnegie Mellon. Here at AISDM, my colleague Rebecca Nugent and I have done a number of things together. We've done a lot of things through the different executive education programs on campus. So lots of different routes to helping companies think through that. I also think it's often best learned experientially. And so even though I'm no longer running the corporate startup lab, I would just make a quick plug for Jim, Jen, and the folks who are running it today, which is, for a relatively modest investment, this becomes a great way for companies to just experience how some of these things can work by a team of 5 or 6 grad students across campus using a lot of these modern technologies to solve modern problems.
Got it. And just digging deeper on this topic, how do you think is AI is shaping the way that company approach like innovation or entrepreneurship internally? And what kinds of challenges do you see when it comes to adopting AI-driven strategies? And what do all the business leaders most concerned about, especially when it comes to how AI might impact their workforce?
Yeah, so there's good research beginning to come out on this, right? So Harvard and Wharton just put out a paper that they did with Procter and Gamble, where they showed, one person working with AI to do new product development, one person working by themselves, and then a teams working by themselves and teams plus AI. And what you see is that the AI basically effectively works as a teammate for the average new product outcomes, but the best outcomes are teams of people working with the tools. And I think that that's what you're going to see. You're going to see really co-invention and co-innovation. And you've seen this from the large tech companies with things like co-scientists as well. The other paper that's interesting on this point, though, was done by a student at MIT who's a PhD candidate there, where he showed that the highest performing innovators in another R&D group, they actually had the strongest impact of using AI to do their job better. And so it's not like it took, the bottom half and raised the floor. It's really, it took the top performers and made them even stronger. And so I think this does reinforce that as it relates to AI and innovation and new product development, you do need to also make sure the kind of core intangibles that your team needs to be aware of are also being covered.
Wow, that's amazing. And given your involvement with AISDM and work on workforce training and upskilling, how do you envision AI transforming the future of job market? And what steps should individuals or organizations take to adapt?
Yeah, so this is an important question, I think, for every company today. And, I have a colleague at Stern, I'm going to just steal his quote because I think it's right. He started saying, AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who knows how to use AI is going to take the job from someone who doesn't. And I think that is directionally correct. So I don't think people need to be afraid about job replacement, but I do think it will be an incredible advantage for the people who end up using these technologies relative to their peers. I think this is also true for companies. Companies that more rapidly adopt AI are going to probably be disruptive to those who lag the adoption of it.
Yeah.
And so, to me, this is partially about training, partially about reskilling, and partially about reimagining your processes and systems.
And a lot of our listeners are still students in their early stage of their career. And could you give us some advice on how should we use AI in the right way in our work, in our studies?
Yeah, so I want to be careful. Like, you should do what your professors' academic integrity policies say. But in general, I think to the extent that you can think about using these language models and more generally these AI tools as a collaborator to accomplish the assignments you're getting in school, the more you can do that, the better. That doesn't mean that you're not ultimately responsible, that the work you hand in doesn't plagiarize, right? Ultimately, that work product is yours.
Yeah.
But you should be using these tools because when you graduate, the expectation for the people who hire you is that they're going to expect you to use these tools to do the jobs that they're hiring you to do, right? If you take a job at a large tech company, they're not going to be impressed that you can, you spent all night programming something that you could have used GitHub Copilot to do in 15 minutes. They're going to ask you why you didn't use GitHub Copilot, right? Your boss is not going to be impressed that you wrote that landing page without using ChatGPT or Anthropic. They're going to want to know why you didn't give them the best work product you can. And so I think this is a challenge for educators and for students, right? Students need to think about using these. And certainly a conversation that a number of us are having at CMU is what are the right things to say in a syllabus to make sure that it reflects them still learning all the transferable skills that we want our students to learn, and make sure that all of the academic integrity stuff is followed, but that we're doing everything we can to prepare them to use this for the jobs that they're going in to do.
Got it. Got it. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. It's fascinating to learn how AI can intersect with innovation, entrepreneurship, and the future of our work. To our listeners, if you'd like to dive deeper into these topics, visit our website at www.cmu.edu/AI-SDM, where you can also submit questions for future guests. Don't forget to subscribe to AI in Real Life for more real talks with real experts. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.